Hello and welcome back to the DJ Frequency. Dino, good to see you.
Good to see you, Jack. Got a good one on today, that's for sure.
We sure do. Dino, today, diving into one of the most iconic and shape-shifting artists in music history, David Bowie. From glam to rock to soul, electronic and beyond, he wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural force. And today, I can't wait to pick your brain. David Bowie, born 8th of January, 1947, Brixton, London. Where do we start, Dino?
I guess it's starting his early days, back when he's a kid, what he was doing and what influenced him and, that kind of thing. But as a kid, he was fascinated by a lot of music that his parents listened to, like jazz and skiffle and early rock and roll. And by the time he was 13, he was actually already learning to play saxophone at that stage. Oh, wow. So he was an early beginner. And saxophone's an instrument I would have loved to have learned to play. I wish I could play the saxophone. But anyway, he started playing in bands as a teenager, bands called the Conrads, the King Bees, the Marnish Boys, but none of them really took off. And it was around that time he realized that he needed a new name too, because being David Robert Jones, as he was born, people called him Davy Jones. And there was already a Davy Jones in the Monkees in the United States. So he became David Bowie. And it's inspired by the American frontiersman Jim Bowie and his famous Bowie knife. So that's where he got the name from.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when you actually say his name, it's like the knife.
It is like the knife. People say, you hear it said a couple of different ways. You hear Bowie and Bowie.
Yeah.
Bow wow like the dog. So I always think to myself, it's Bowie like the knife, the Bowie knife. Or bow and arrow is the other one.
Yeah, what a great name. The fact that there was already someone called Davy Jones in the Monkees, and he's like, no, I don't want to be that. I need to be something else. Like, because that name, David Bowie, is just like, but he had alter egos, didn't he?
He did, not till a little bit later on in his career. But in 1969 was this huge breakthrough because just as the world was watching Apollo 11 land on the moon, Bowie released a song that was going to change his life, and it was Space Oddity. In the story, it told the story of an astronaut, Major Tom, drifting into the void and it became his first big UK hit. And the big thing about that is that during the coverage of the Apollo 11 moon landing, the BBC played the song along with the television coverage. So it gave it huge exposure. And it became a massive, massive hit. And then over the next few years, he sort of sharpened his craft a little bit with albums like The Man Who Sold the World and Hunky Dory.
Yeah, when they play a song like that, obviously that was, 1969. There would have only been a couple of TV channels, a few newspapers. There was no Facebook or TikTok.
No, well, that's right. I mean, literally, I think, I don't know, back then, probably one or two channels maximum. Maybe in the States they had a few more, but I'm thinking in the UK, I think there's the BBC 1, 2, and 3, pretty much. So, yeah, and I mean, being on BBC 1, because it was a worldwide event, the moon landing.
Yes.
It was a global event. And the BBC, linked onto that song, that, this is Ground Control to Major Tom. And, of course, it just fitted so perfectly. Became a massive hit being played, multiple times through that period.
And that was the first introduction I had, was actually through a movie. And we've talked about how movies and music connect so well. Was Mr. Deeds, when the scene they're in the airplane and they sing that song a cappella. And I'm like, oh, this is really catchy. And my dad's like, hold on, I know that song. And he played it for me. And that was my first experience with David Bowie.
Well, I think that it's probably most people's, to be fair, because it's one of those songs that's become so iconic, and it's in so many movies and TV series now. And I mean, it's a song that probably everybody knows at least 60 or 70% of the words to, if not all of them. I mean, it is probably most people's introduction, and it's such a sort of really drifty, sort of emotional kind of song where you imagine this guy floating in the nothingness of space. It's really got an emotional sort of feel to it too. So I think it really captured people. And when it's the first song you ever hear, it kind of captures you, brings you in, and makes you think, I've got to find out more about this artist.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's so much more to learn about him. Now,
Mm.
the going from the breakthrough, of course, with the Space Oddity, the glam rock hits. So he's been called what I've done my research, a chameleon of sorts.
Indeed. So his first real character was in 1972-73. He unleashed Ziggy Stardust. Now, Ziggy was flamboyant, androgynous, and it was his basically his androgynous alter ego from outer space.
Hmm.
So the album was called The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And there was just a revelation. Hits like Starman, Suffragette City, the title track. He became a global superstar almost overnight with that album.
With going between different kind of alter egos and maybe genres, also he definitely went through mainstream as well. Like Let's Dance still gets played on mainstream radio to this day.
Yeah, well, that's right. From the very early beginnings of Ziggy Stardust, because Let's Dance is about 12 years later, before after Ziggy. Ziggy was that sort of character. It was a dazzling sort of character. Was in that glam rock movement, and he sort of blurred the lines a bit between gender, sexuality, performance, and all those kind of things, with really bright costumes, outrageous makeup, and shocked conservative audiences. But he just inspired countless young fans because he embodied that whole glam rock movement. But then, in true Bowie fashion, he killed off Ziggy Stardust at the height of his fame. So, at a 1973 concert in London, he told fans, "This is the last show we'll ever do." And he walked off stage as Ziggy Stardust. People didn't even know at the time whether he was saying, "I'm completely throwing it in." That's what people sort of read into that he was quitting music. But then, of course, he came out the next year with his next character, if you like.
Wow. Okay, so he was really like it was an alter ego. This
100% it was, yeah.
like bright colored person. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think, like you said, it kind of shocked conservative audiences because no one else was doing anything like that, or was it just weird or different? Like what made it so kind of wow?
It was the uniqueness of it. It certainly was. I mean, because he really made people look. The outfits and the makeup were outrageous. The songs were catchy and engaging, and you couldn't help but fall in love. When I first listened to Ziggy Stardust and saw the visuals of it as a probably 10 or 12-year-old, somewhere around there, I was just absolutely encapsulated in it. I had to find out more about this guy.
And then finding more about him, I'm sure you did. So going from the death of Ziggy Stardust, what did he come out as? Did he have a different name, or was he David? What was the vibe?
They called him the Thin White Duke. So he released in 74. That was kind of the catch name he got with himself. So in 74, he released Diamond Dogs. It was a dark sort of dystopian album. And it was inspired by George Orwell's 1984 novel. And around this time, he also moved to the United States, and he soaked up all the soul and funk influences. And his 1975 Young Americans album produced his big hit Fame. That was his first number one in the US, and co-written actually by with John Lennon.
Oh, wow.
But that fame that he hit in the US, that came at a cost because by the mid 1970s, with the release of the Young Americans, the number one album and song, he was deep into a cocaine addiction. And that's where the new persona sort of come from, the Thin White Duke. He was a stylish, dressed in a suit, but cold looking, almost dangerous figure. And that's showcased. There's an album called Station to Station, which really showcases why they called him the Thin White Duke. But it was a real turbulent time. Brilliant music, but you've got to say personal chaos, pretty much.
Can you hear that in the music?
I think you can. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Young Americans and Diamond Dogs probably more, but Young Americans is a very sort of polished sort of soul and funk sort of inspired album, but very, I would say, cocaine driven by probably the late nights in the studio getting it just right.
Yeah. So before his move to America, he wasn't very well known in the States.
Probably reasonably well known from the Space Oddity.
Yeah,
of course, probably reasonably well known, but I wouldn't say he was as huge as he was after he released Ziggy Stardust. So I think he was reasonably big in the States with Ziggy Stardust. I'd have to check my facts on that.
yeah.
But certainly Young Americans was his big mainstream breakthrough there.
And Dino, of course, a movie we've all seen, 1986, Labyrinth.
Yes.
A very, very good movie. He appeared in films, a couple of films.
He did a few films in the later 80s as he sort of got away a bit from the music in the late 80s, or from the David Bowie sort of and I just said it there. See how I said that? I said Bowie.
Yeah.
So easy to make that mistake because people say it two different ways. David Bowie. There you go. Yeah, in the late 80s, he was sort of getting away from music a little bit and his stage presence, and did go more into the movies. But he worked his way towards that. It was sort of a progression how he got there. Mm-hmm. So what he did to get away from that cocaine addiction, between 76 and 79, he moved to Berlin. And he moved there with his good friend Iggy Pop. Now, in Berlin, he reinvented himself again, and he went sort of experimental, electronic sounds. He collaborated with Brian Eno, and he released 3 groundbreaking albums while he was there. An album called Low, an album called Lodger, but the big hit was Heroes, and the song Heroes. In particular, one of his greatest albums, We Can Be Heroes Just for One Day. And there was an emotional track that was about love and defiance and about the shadow of the Berlin Wall. So really a creative kind of rebirth from him, and it set the stage kind of for his next evolution. But he was a very serious man with that,
I like how these, and we've talked about this many times about artists back in the day, you just don't get them like that anymore. Like that they're singing and writing these masterpieces about real life things, and they take you on the journey, and through his addiction and his style bending ways, you kind of are on the journey as well. I feel like we just don't have that nowadays with artists.
Different scene, wasn't it? When you think about the way that it operates now, and again, the social media thing is a big driver of that. We're so connected now that we don't need to be, running out to see artists every time they're in town, or buying every album the second it comes out in the stores, because we don't do that anymore. So yeah, it has, and that's certainly changed the way that that bands have sort of evolved, because they haven't evolved with that life. And I think it was that life that was driving them towards the music that they wrote. You know what I mean? It was because it was on real experience, and it was about real things and real people.
Had you seen him live before?
I've seen him 3 times live.
Oh, yeah. Stop it! That's so cool. Can you talk us through your experiences of seeing?
The one I remember the most is the Serious Moonlight tour. So that's where he went. Where he sort of went after the 80s and that trip in Berlin. He had an album, Scary Monsters, in the early 80s, and that gave us songs like Ashes to Ashes, which was kind of a sequel to Major Tom and the Space Oddity. Talked about Major Tom again for the first time in that song. But then we talk about Let's Dance, the album produced by Nile Rodgers, polished, funky, commercially massive, talking about hits that you said before, like Let's Dance, China Girl, Modern Love. He all of a sudden he was a mainstream pop icon, dominating MTV, stadium tours all around the world, and that was the tour I saw him on, the Serious Moonlight Tour.
Where did he come to New Zealand, or were you overseas?
Yep. No, that was in New Zealand. That was at Western Springs.
He
19. That would have been 19. Well, yeah, I can probably 1984, 85, 83. It must have been 83, 84 because it came out in 83. So it must have been 84 that I saw him. Yeah, that's about right.
See, that's so cool. Like we're very lucky here in this small country, because even back then, we would have only had 3 and a bit million maybe for the whole country. The fact that the likes of David Bowie came to New Zealand, because nowadays we are so forgotten about from artists around the world. Like, yeah, they come, but they only go to Auckland, and some of them are slowly going into Christchurch now. But we get missed out a lot by these international acts.
Yeah, and I think that's harking back to the days of record sales, and we can take it back to record and CD sales again, and cassette tape sales, because all of those massive tours that were going all around the world didn't need to make so much money, because the record companies were making so much money out of albums and the sale of music, that the touring and merchandising became was a bit secondary. It wasn't the most important focus, money wise, for profit. But nowadays, because of like the streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, and all the rest of them, the only way that artists can make money these days is by touring, playing live, and merchandising. And so if they're going to come to Auckland, Taylor Swift, not worth their while to come here. Wouldn't make enough money to make it worth their while. So, back in the day, she'd be making so much money with the record companies that they'd probably suck up that 15 or 20% of profit and bring her here anyway to increase album sales.
Dino, reading my notes here, talking about Bowie as a visual artist.
Yep.
A lot of people described him as more than just music.
Well, he was, because you talked before, he went into acting in the movie Labyrinth was his first one. Pretty sure Labyrinth was his first one. And he played Jareth the Goblin King, and he was fantastic in that movie. Yeah. But he also grew pretty restless with his music, and he formed a band called Tin Machine, deliberately stepping away from that solo sort of spotlight, and try to do something raw and different. In the 90s, though, he really delved into that electronic, industrial kind of alternative rock era, and embraced that. Albums like there was Outside and Earthling. Saw him collaborating with that artist like Trent Reznor from the 9 Inch Nails. His music was kind of darker, edgier, and it was in tune with the experimental sounds of the decade.
With his touch on the world, obviously, no longer Earthside, do you think his reach kind of resonates because of so many, like he touched everyone, because he went to the soul, went to the pop, he was in movies, he was doing different things with his style, he kind of touched every avenue as such, he didn't just stay in one lane?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that was a key thing that he did, that reinvention of himself to not be the same whole thing on tour to tour, every couple of years. I mean, that was just brilliant, really. But then, then he diversified into those movies. His music diversified with the times. He always had a take on modern music, and that happened right up until he passed away. He was still releasing music, and the last video he ever did was quite dramatic and pretty amazing.
Well, final album, Blackstar, he essentially wrote his own farewell, released it days before he passed.
Yep, that's what his own farewell, that's what they say. And on his 69th birthday he released Blackstar, and that was a sort of I guess you could say, a haunting kind of jazz infused album with really cryptic kind of lyrics, and a lot of symbolism. But just 2 days later he died of liver cancer, and it was a battle that he kept secret from the world too. He hadn't told his fans, but that's when they realized that Blackstar was more than an album. It was actually his really carefully crafted farewell his fans, if you like.
Which is nice, because as these world star artists, these superstars, at that level, like superstar, they don't owe us anything. They don't have to tell us what's happening behind closed doors. They already bleed their souls out with their music. So to have that, as a fan of his, Dino, how did you feel listening to that, knowing that he passed away? You're listening to it. Like, what did you take from that?
It was really quite emotional, because I actually listened to it. I didn't listen to it straight away. And because he passed away 2 days after it was released. So I probably heard it the day after that, or the day that we heard. And so you kind of, and had already guessed with the timing that there was something good, like the Ozzy Osbourne farewell show. Ozzy knew what he was doing. He knew his time had come. And I think David Bowie knew the same thing. He knew his time had come as well. And when you listen to the album and feel the music, you can feel that it really was an emotional farewell. It feels like a farewell. It's like same as Ozzy's performance live, and that felt like him saying goodbye.
Yeah.
Same thing with this album.
You just don't get him like that anymore, and I don't think we ever will, just with the climate we're now in, and everything is so fast paced. Dino,
Sorry.
No, you're right. So I'm just saying, if someone came to you and they said, "Oh, I'm getting into this artist. Oh, David Bowie. I've never heard of him," and you go, "Hey, look, I've got a playlist for you." What are the 3 songs or the 3 albums that you're kind of? I know it's too hard, but I know you're a fan. What would you introduce someone to ease them into the experience?
There's a Bowie compilation called Changes, which basically has his everything up until Scary Monsters, probably in the early 80s. So before Let's Dance and all those songs. And that's a greatest hits compilation. That's where I'd point you to straight away, would be that compilation. As far as favorite songs go, boy, oh boy, there's so many of them. Starman. I love the fun rock and roll riff of Suffragette City, and the words that go along with that, because it was just so not Bowie, the words to that song. And I said it again. Notice that? I just said Bowie again. Pull myself up.
Bowie in his grave.
Yeah, and Young Americans too, because I love the saxophone, and I love the saxophone in Young Americans, one another favourite of mine. But because he had, I think the time leading up to him passing away, he kind of knew maybe that he was ill a bit earlier than that. In the early 2000s, he had a couple of albums, one called Heathen and one called Reality. And he seemed unstoppable. And then all of a sudden he was on tour in 2004, and he had to leave the tour due to what was called serious health issues. And after that, he stepped back for nearly a decade before he released music again. And he just lived a quiet life in New York City with his wife, the supermodel Iman, and his daughter Alexandria. And for quite a while, for nearly 10 years, it seemed like that David Bowie might be done with music until the release of the album in 2013, which was the next day. But then the parting gift after that was in 2016, which was the release of Blackstar.
Yeah, the parting gift. It really is a way to leave your legacy. Now, with a legacy, you normally get to deal with a bunch of other celebrities, superstars, and musicians alike. Is there any standout features or songs that he helped with that come to mind?
Oh, look, there's the most amazing song, the most camp video you will ever see of Mick Jagger and David Bowie. And I did it again, David Bowie, doing
Dancing
in the Streets.
I've heard of that one. Yeah, Dancing in the Streets. Okay.
Great song, but such a camp video. And they have a lot of fun in it, obviously, wearing their bright clothes and hamming it up to each other. He did a lot of songwriting, one with his very good friend, Iggy Pop. And Iggy Pop helped him to write his hit China Girl, which was basically a euphemism for heroin in China White, that song. And a lot of people don't know either that David Bowie, and Mick Jagger. And I think this was in 1975, I believe, in New York City. And they were in a hotel together, staying in separate rooms, but on the same floor in the hotel. And they were meant to be going out to dinner with Iggy Pop. And at the last minute, David Bowie changed his mind and told Mick Jagger he wasn't going. And so Mick Jagger said, I'm not going to bother going if you're not going. So they both stayed home and cancelled their dinner. The next people to use the lift in the hotel on the floor that Bowie and Jagger would have got the lift to go downstairs to meet Iggy Pop, the next people plummeted to their death when the cable snapped, and that lift plummeted 17 floors and killed 4 people, or 3 people, I think. And the next, so if they had have gone to dinner with Iggy Pop that night, would have been Bowie and Jagger in that lift.
Holy shit, the what if, imagine that.
Yeah, Bowie talks about it. He's talked about it a lot, and he's been asked about it in interviews and things. And, that's just one of those moments, isn't it? That's like, it's got to be karma. It's got to be good karma and good for, obviously you got to feel for the people that lost their lives. Well, when you say this, but, they saved some legends for us, didn't they?
Yeah, the universe had other plans. And that's the thing with those things, you just never know. Like, the sky could fall tomorrow. I could get hit biking to work in the morning on my bike. Like, you just don't know. And that's why I think life is so good, and it's even better with music, and it's even better with artists like David Bowie and your Mick Jaggers and such. Dino, what a brain to pick of yours. If I was going to buy a Bowie CD or gift someone something in the Bowie universe for, say, a dad or a brother who likes the music, what am I buying? What is it? A vinyl? Is it a tape? Is it like a t-shirt? Is there something iconic that they should have?
Well, I would say that that going back to the album I talked about before, the Changes album, but I think really, if you wanted to get a true sense of what Bowie is and who he is, you can have a look at, there's a box set coming out in September called I Can't Give Everything Away. And that is the compilation of his last 5 albums, and in a box set that's coming out, I think, on September the 12th. Okay. So his last 5 albums, a whole bunch of liner notes, exclusive studio photos and handwritten notes. It comes out on vinyl and CD and those kind of things. So that would be, I think, a great thing to buy for somebody who wanted to understand a bit more about the man David Bowie. Bowie.
Bowie.
Now I'm confused myself.
as long as you're listening to him, I reckon.
Exactly. I mean, because the Changes compilation, definitely a fantastic album to hear his classic songs. But yeah, I Can't Give Everything Away, which is all those last 5 albums from the 2000s, a sense of what the man really was, I think, and what he left us. He was an artist. He never stood still. He always looked towards the future. Never got stuck in the moment. And he left us with a legacy that will just continue for generations. There's no doubt about that. He wasn't just a musician. He was a cultural innovator, and he challenged the norms. He redefined his identity and reinvented himself, from Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke right through to Blackstar. He sold over 100 million records, influenced generations of musicians, and probably left behind one of the most diverse musical catalogs in music history.
Dino, as always, an absolute pleasure to pluck your brain of knowledge. And I'm going to actually link the Changes playlist on the Spotify link. So if you're tuning in on Spotify, you'll see the link down below. I'm definitely going to chuck it on blast, and I'm going to go dive down the rabbit hole of what David Bowie is. And I think I might even watch Labyrinth. So thank you, Dino. I appreciate it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, if you haven't seen Labyrinth before, it's a great watch. It's a great watch.
Well, until next week, Dino, it's always good to see you, my friend.
Hey, you take care, Jack, and peace and love to everybody out there. We'll see you next week.